So, Civil War. Yeah, it's a weird week when I go and see a movie instead of doing the normal Tuku vlogs I do. I felt it was more important to get my stuff done with Tiga and address this because even from the preview information, they were sort of showing that this is how you do a superhero movie where superheroes fight each other. I mean, I've reviewed enough of superhero fights, superhero stuff in the last few years to kind of give a general gist of where they screw up, and that it's not from the really ideological divides, it's from heroes not being heroes for the event or show. Ryuki, Kamara the First, all of the Tyson films are guilty of this at some point, and Civil War is how you do it. Hell, Batman vs. Superman didn't do it because you still had to do character assassination that went against the core of their principles to actually get it to do that. I mean, seriously, if you've not... Okay, yeah, I'm on the negative, highly critical side of that whole mess, and pretty much, you want a Batman vs. Superman event that doesn't suck, you go to the DC animated universe. They did it in 1997, 1996, correctly. Pretty much most of this movie is based on the events of Civil War the comic book, which I have not read because I don't really read comics, and the state of the comic industry makes me very disenfranchised to actually, going out and buying their comic books. I'll see the movies because they have stuff that interests me. Guardians of the Galaxy had stuff that interests me. Deadpool had stuff that interests me, and there's really a hard time picking a bad Deadpool comic. So I'm not entirely blind to the whole comic books thing, especially thanks to comic book review shows on the internet, kind of covering both the mix of the better and worse events. But I'm not judging this on the basis of how it aligns with the comic book. And honestly, Civil War the comic book is very much mixed to poor, and this movie was good, mainly because it does what pretty much all of the Marvel movies have succeeded at, even the worst ones, since they started the whole Marvel cinematic universe thing post the success of Iron Man, is that it keeps them human, it keeps their actions understandable, it keeps them grounded so you can empathize and sympathize with characters and, just come to understand them on a personal level. They don't always completely succeed at that. I'll admit some of the stuff thrown at Age of Ultron isn't unjustified, but it still mostly succeeds as being... It's not awful, but it's far from awful. I bring up Age of Ultron in that a lot of Civil War is born out of the aftermath of its events, which, hey, it's a cinematic universe. Events are supposed to build off of each other even when they're on their own standalone thing, because there's a causality you have to respect, and it would be more disrespectful to ignore it than use it to launch the next story opportunity. For example, Batman vs. Superman, they're originally going to ignore the whole Man of Steel consequences thing entirely. It's only when, they were calling out that in the criticisms of Man of Steel that they decided to go back and, add a bit of that. And what it resulted in is a movie where someone that murders indiscriminately, who previously had extreme personal convictions against murdering people, goes and condemns another individual for murdering people, and does not seem to realize the hypocrisy of that. Anyways, oh yeah, I know I'm boiling down to the gist, but I don't want to debate with people on Batman vs. Superman. Seriously, Batman kills people with guns in that movie, and at the core of his character, Batman is against killing people and against using guns. It's like, You can't get the character more wrong than that unless you're basing him off of the character he was before they gave him his backstory, literally early on in the comics. Like, this is early, no, like a couple years after they created the character when they were finally fleshing him out. But every point past that, yeah, you're kind of violating the majority of his history on that. But again, don't want to debate people on Batman vs. Superman. I've made my position pretty clear on that. But here it's a war of ideology in that both sides are right and both sides are wrong. And because they're being forced into this conflict pretty much by their natures, I wouldn't say that the villain is allowed to instigate his plan, but the simmering tension of this of the fallout from that is much of where the conflict is born. See, this is obviously going to get into spoiler territory. During one of the Avengers' recent missions, the Scarlet Witch screws up and accidentally causes someone who is suicide bombing to, like, she throws it up in the air to try and prevent people from being injured in it, but as a consequence of that, she ends up causing collateral damage due to the angle she throws the man who's exploding at. So she saved people, but in doing so, she also harmed people. So it's like, you're doing something for the right reason, except you still ended up injuring people. And there wasn't a easy way out of that. It's a legitimate catch-22. Like, if she maybe yanked him a different direction away from the building, that might have worked, but it's like a split second action that if you don't have fine control, which Scarlet Witch in this movie is established to not have, or she doesn't have complete control of her abilities, despite what control she might have. That it's a screw up that costs people's lives, but not doing that would have let more people be injured, killed, wounded. So she starts off pretty down in the dumps about that, and it pretty much just is the final straw in a list of Avengers incidents where people got hurt because of the threats they were facing and their mixed effectiveness in dealing with them. And their mixed effectiveness because they're human. They are a small task force of specialized individuals that have the ability to deal with this. And admittedly, much of the condemnations is not having the greater picture of the instance. For example, in the movie, they cite both the original New York incident from the first movie, which is, yeah, that was someone trying to cause an alien invasion, so any collateral from that is you can place on someone else, as had they not done anything, that would have gotten more people killed. Ooh, reminder of current events. And in Captain America: The Winter Soldier, it's again evil organization. That time Hydra has helicarriers which will kill any enemies of the organization, and they're taking them down, but people are injured / die when they're taken out because they couldn't be taken down safely. And it's like, it's the soldier perspective in that you're doing your best to save as many people as you can. These are monstrous war machines that will annihilate them, and yeah, you're not going to be able to save everyone. That is the realistic perspective. Where it becomes more difficult to be fully behind that is when you take into account Sokovia, which is where Age of Ultron climaxed, and Ultron did the thing with taking the city and turning it into a makeshift asteroid to try and destroy the planet, and everyone that died there from pretty much what can ultimately held to be culpable of Tony Stark's ego. And you kind of get to see where you need to be held in check, held responsible. And Tony Stark is in full recognition of this failing. He has been pretty much doing everything he can to try and make up for that incident, because that was ultimately 100% his fault. And this is where we diverge from the Marvel and DC again, because as I kind of inferred before, much of Batman versus Superman was calling someone else out for their lack of taking responsibility themselves, while also not taking responsibility for their own actions. Here, it's Tony has definitely taken responsibility for his actions. He holds himself culpable. He's trying to make up for all of that. The Avenger and it's kind of different in expression. Captain America and everybody else of the Avengers are trying to pretty much do the same thing and try and make up for it by trying to be better than that. That's why Scarlet Witch is on the team. She helped cause that incident by her actions, and is trying to help people now to make up for her role in it. And she screws up, and she holds herself accountable. And then this whole registration, no, not the registration, that's the comics it's based on. The Soviet Accords essentially put the Avengers back in check by giving them oversight and, holding them responsible. And I'm not exactly sure why Steve is against this, because it doesn't seem much different than when he was actually part of the army. He would still report to someone, and he's ultimately a soldier. I want to say it's because of more of the fallout with S.H.I.E.L.D. and him becoming disenfranchised to the modern government, because he's someone that find the bad guy, stop the bad guy. That's pretty direct. It's not without thought, because he's a very intelligent individual and soldier. But it's not as black and white as that. There's a lot of gray that, with the whole spy elements of how he was operating before with the smaller team and just Black Widow, it definitely got him disenfranchised to everything with S.H.I.E.L.D., and that fell apart. And that was previously the Avengers, who they reported to, who they were responsible to, and who they were held accountable for. And now with them gone, they're not exactly rogue, but limited to their morals and have no one to hold them responsible for aside from on the world stage. And a lot of the team are for this oversight simply so they won't make those mistakes, so they won't be complete vigilante. And I think the reason Steve is against it is pretty much because he sees what happened with S.H.I.E.L.D. happening again due to, as he says in the movie, people's own personal agendas, because that's what happened with S.H.I.E.L.D. And Tony's against that. It's kind of like a flipping of positions that the two previously were adherent to, honestly, because Tony Stark was previously against all that authority in the beginning of the movies. His movie series, at least, because he couldn't trust anyone to not abuse his technology. And after post-Ultron, he realized he can't trust himself anymore because he caused that screw-up and cost so many people their lives. So you definitely see it from both sides on why they take the sides they do on this issue, and it's simply the series of events that causes its escalation that leads them into a situation where they can fight. And that is all caused by Helmut Zeno. I think that's the right person. Yes, Helmut Zemo lost his family in the Sokovia incident and um, is rightfully taken out on the Avengers. So in this instance, it's much like the recurring thing with Tony Stark's enemies. He is ultimately responsible for creating all his own enemies, and he wants to destroy them. He wants to instigate a series of incidents that make people lose faith on them and effectively destroy their entire agenda of helping people, because them helping people lost him his family. So you can the villain's motivations are understandable as well, and he does this by pretty much researching everyone, which is pretty damn easy, as he lived in Sokovia, and Sokovia was the hideout for Hydra. Though, apologies for that. So he has access to all of the Hydra information that the Avengers might not, and that leads him to special operatives that can get him the details on the Winter Soldier, which he can use to effectively destroy the team because of the divide of Bucky. So he fakes a terrorist attack. I shouldn't say he fakes a terrorist attack, but he instigates a terrorist attack and frames the Winter Soldier, Bucky, by using a series of prosthetics and surveillance, and pretty much uses the state of the world and its hyper vigilance against terrorism against them, and even the own Avengers' personal motivations against them due to Steve's own issues concerning Bucky and those around him. And another piece of the film that helps make it very human is the relation of everyone and their difficulty in getting over and getting past very personal losses. In this movie, Peggy Carter, one of the supporting characters from the first Captain America movie, she got her own spin-off series. She was the creator of S.H.I.E.L.D., or founder of S.H.I.E.L.D., I should say, and love interest to Steve. She passes away very early on in the movie. The actress they got for old Peggy Carter isn't even in it, and this was one of a few remaining connections to Steve's life in the 40s before he was frozen. It was pretty much just her and Bucky, and due to that kind of jump in... I apologize. Yeah, people are assholes around me with the noise thing. So he doesn't know how to really let go, as he pretty much just... everyone that he was close to went while he was gone. He never really got a chance to say goodbye. And with Peggy Carter, that was an incident again. He wasn't there to say goodbye to her when she died, and then pretty much all he has left is Bucky, his best friend, who he thought was dead, but has been turned into a super soldier killing machine, and left him, and he's tried to help him, and now he's wanted by everyone because they think he bombed a UN building while they were signing the Sokovia Accords he disagrees with. And in that incident, he killed the leader of the fictional country of Wakanda. Wakanda has been brought up intermittently in the movies as a fictional location in the Marvel Universe, which is pretty much the, what's the phrase? The only known source for the fictional metal known as vibranium, which is what Captain America's ridiculously durable shield is made out of, and a bunch of other things that have popped up infrequently, such as Ultron made his body out of it, and the Black Panther, who is the king of Wakanda, well, he's the king of Wakanda now, has a suit made out of it. That's his superhero outfits, and pretty much a very important nation in the series, included to introduce a new character drive events due to their tumultuous. Like I said, everybody around me is an asshole. Where was my? I lost my train of thought. Yes, Wakanda, important location. The current leader of it dies, and his son T'Challa is pretty much out for revenge against who they think is Bucky. But since Bucky's being framed, and Captain knows he's not Captain, Steve knows he wouldn't do that anymore. He's, or where was I? Anyways, Steve has faith in him because he's not has faith that Bucky didn't do it, in part because of how his last starring movie ended, as in not ensemble. It was actually him as the star, Winter Soldier, ended with Bucky coming back to himself and helping him and running off. So he knows the person that's in control now, and he knows he wouldn't do that. But because of the whole Avengers issue, they're not exactly being, what's the phrase? They view him as too close on all of it, especially since he's on the whole outside disagrees with the Sokovia Accords. So for all they know, Captain America could have, what's the phrase? Collaborated with this person he has a personal connection to pretty much show that, yeah, these don't work, you need us to have all the authority we want to deal with it. And that's, well, it would be wrong. It's not out of the range of suspicion, since Cap just pretty much defies everyone's thoughts and goes after Bucky, because he is legitimately the best person to bring him in and find out why. And he's not invalid on that, because the person who actually sends in a force against them are shoot first, ask questions never, because they don't want to know why, they just want to know who. And had they done that, they wouldn't have actually found out about Zemo, who actually, in a way that this would have been both better and worse, as had they not saved Bucky, then Bucky would have died, and the event, America, I keep wanting to call him that Captain America, because that's his superhero name, but that's not who he is, paradoxically. Because that wouldn't have gotten what Zemo wanted. He wants them to destroy themselves, so he would have just kept trying. This would have just made Steve disenfranchised to the whole thing and possibly left, but that wouldn't have really caused the the family feud. Not that that's not the exact phrase I want. Pretty much the destroy the family moment where they're actually at each other's throats. That's simply what he's building up to through all these events, and he keeps building on it because he learned about everyone beforehand. He kind of just planned his everything by playing off their humanity and expectations. As then he infiltrates the center after Bucky's brought in alive, which wouldn't have happened if Steve hadn't gotten involved and rescued him, and uses a programming book to pretty much access the brainwashing stuff in Bucky's head to pretty much get the rest of the information that he needs from him, which is another set of super soldiers. And of course, because he got that information, that's what they think he wants, is to turn those super soldiers loose and actually destroy a physical location. It's not, but it's a logical subversion with the information they have. Because one of the things that emphasizes more than anything else is no one here is stupid. That's one of my biggest pet peeves in movies is when people that are shown to be intelligent, implied to be intelligent, act like fucking imbeciles. It's more rampant than you think. By this point, however, Steve the Falcon, whose first name I'm forgetting, and Bucky are on the wrong side of the law, and they're getting half the Avengers on their side, plus Ant-Man, and pretty much everyone else has allied behind Tony to actually bring them in because they're breaking the law. They're making it worse for everyone else, and they're pretty much going and doing things without actually respecting the consequences. And admittedly, it's all done in a way where you can understand where they're coming from when they're doing that. Except there's a moment in here where it's before Bucky is reprogrammed and set loose in the movie where Tony brings out a pair of pens, and it's kind of effectively an olive branch to Steve, and this is the specific moment where everything goes to hell for them. It's had Steve signed the Sokovia Accords, like agreed, even if they were amended and changed and became something he could abide by, with respect to being held accountable by a higher, not exactly a better, higher authority, but a panel of people to do that stuff. It's possible the movie would not have made this next turn, but because the underlying issues between the two and concerning the issue, that's not a plausible series of events to them. Because Steve is both right and wrong in this, in that Bucky has been framed, but the higher-ups that Tony is working with now don't see it that way. They want him dead. They have no interest on proving his innocence. They just want the problem solved and nothing else to come with it. They're not solving the problem. They're wanting to put out the fires the problem causes. And this is mainly because the person that has been put in charge of all of them is Thunderbolt Ross, a U.S. Army general in the Marvel Universe that is pretty notoriously a villain of the Marvel Universe due to his refusal to listen to anyone but himself, pretty much. He's normally a Hulk villain, and pretty much he's trying to put all of them under heel so he can control them, aka just what Steve was worried about. The wrong person was put in charge of the event, was put in charge of, managing the Avengers under the Sokovia Accords. So while Tony is right, morally, ethically, Steve can't agree with that because morally, ethically, the wrong people were put in charge before. And it's because of that this spirals out of control, honestly, because he doesn't listen to them when they bring in the evidence. He doesn't allow them the opportunity to bring this all to a proper conclusion. He just wants Bucky in and the others arrested. So there's no middle ground. There's no room for them to compromise on this. So we get ultimately the big fight scene where if they didn't have this restraining leash by this asshole, they could have talked it out. They could have listened to each other. They could have bring him in. I'll trust you on this because of our history. but we can't do that with him with no evidence against it. We'll listen to you on this other issue if this is it might provide the evidence you want, and there's no sign of that. It would just be bring Bucky in, we'll leave the rest as the rest, and it's kind of sad in that because it never really gives that chance. It's more ultimatum before they force the fights. And admittedly, the fight scene is really good. It's not just two people beating the crap out of each other, even though they have other powers and abilities that they can use that avoid beating the crap out of each other. They use all these skills and abilities that all of these superheroes have shown to be able to utilize, and that what makes it dynamic, fun, and interesting. You don't get that with the Tyson movies, which I have reviewed again and again, because they're just overly basic and forcing the fight out most of the time. I mean, there are a few exceptions, but they're usually more related to spectacle. Like, I think the best about that in the end was ultimately Superhero Tyson Z, but it was only like one or two scenes where they actually have that, and the rest of the time it's poor fights. Especially in the later ones. But yeah, it's not just a beat the crap out of everyone to be victorious thing. It's changing opponents. It's fighting dynamic. It's everyone gets a legitimate chance to shine, despite juggling 12 superheroes in the brawl with mostly a great variety in who can do what. They got Spider-Man for this movie. Tom Holland. Deal with Sony to get him in the movie. I'm not really talking about much because he's pretty much reintroduced for the second time. I say reintroduced because you got Tobey Maguire, and then you have Andrew Garfield, and then you have Tom Holland. First introduction in the early 2000s. Second introduction in the early 2010s. Now this new guy. So yeah, audiences are already pretty familiar with the Spider-Man stuff. You just needed pretty basic establishment to get him in the movie for his scenes, and it's a good mix between Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, and he honestly is written a bit better than Tobey Maguire's, because the original Spider-Man movie series is pretty damn cheesy, but it works for it because, hey, Spider-Man's a wisecracker, and Sam Raimi is good with doing cheesy movies that are nonetheless very entertaining and respected, and that was what he did as his big one. I shouldn't say big ones, big main blockbuster movies versus more cult and niche films with mostly Bruce Campbell. I love those movies. But the dialogue that flows from Spider-Man in this movie seems a lot more organic and, once again, human. And I know that seems to be my watchword, but as of late, but it really is. Like, people acting as if they were real people, that's really what you should be shooting for when making any of this stuff. Because he's constantly, it's a bunch of please stop talking moments, but done in a way that aren't annoying because he's just being so amazed and energetic, and yeah, he is a bit annoying, but in a endearing way. It's like, I could see them in universe getting frustrated with that because they've been involved in all of this longer, but yet you can't exactly deny him the opportunity to quip as it's appropriate. Like, Ant-Man uses his size manipulation abilities to grow into a giant in here, and one of his quips start off with referencing hey, have you ever seen that old movie, The Empire Strikes Back? And it's like, the the theater I was in, the audience laughed because to us that isn't really an old movie, even though it's older than I am. So yeah, it is an old movie, but most of the cast is of an age where they would have seen that movie possibly when it was originally in theaters. I know at least Tony Stark would have, and I'm pretty sure Captain America would have seen it because he put it on a list of things to watch because he's in the future. Earlier in the Marvel movies, if I remember correctly, it was one of the funny scenes in the Avengers. So yeah, he would have known about that too. So it also effectively feels like a callback, and not simply because Disney not only owns Marvel, but also Star Wars now. And it plays off to the movie's credit, as then they used the same strategy that the Rebellion used against the AT-AT walkers and Hoth. Just tied up his legs and knocked them over. It works. But yeah, this leads to the final stuff in the movie where half the Avengers are imprisoned by Ross, not as in high security. These are psychopaths prison in a ocean underwater prison, not unlike Impel Down from One Piece. I don't know if this is a actual Marvel location where they done this, but it's pretty much Tony realizing that though he's trying to bring accountability, not only take personal accountability up to the next level with the Avengers off of everything that has been his arc in the series, he's realizing that he put his faith in the wrong people, and that's where he screwed up. And he screwed up big time there. Not at all because he was wrong, because he wasn't wrong. It's just, he expected, I don't even know actually what he expected from this, but he did, everyone is now paying the consequences, but they're not paying them appropriately. They're still heroes. They were still ultimately doing the right thing. Why are they being imprisoned by this jackass that doesn't even know what the hell they were doing? So it's like, it's him. I think he has a moment of realization where he's on the wrong side for the right reasons. And then we get to the base where Zemo has come to, and we get the realization that Tony and Steve's argument has escalated to the final degree, and they've been arguing, they've been idealistically opposed throughout the movies, and they have their friendly moments, but there's still this underlying bitterness between them, because Steve sees an inferior counterpart to someone that was his friend, and Tony sees someone that his father compared him to all of his life and found him wanting. So there's this deep-seated, I don't want to say disrespect, but I don't think either of them are acknowledging the other person quite as themselves, more as this predetermined picture of a different person. And they're still friends, but it's where this just comes up. And Tony through the movies has had, when this scene came up, my mind instantly flashed to a moment in the first Avengers movie, the first Iron Man movie, where after getting out of the whole incident where he was kidnapped and had the near-death experience and had the shrapnel shoved into his chest and built the whole magnet to even survive, is like, he sits down with in front of a bunch of reporters, has the first thing he's probably eaten from a civilized part of the world that's not been manufactured by terrorists in quite some time, and he just breaks down and has a moment of weakness where he admits that he regrets not being able to say goodbye to his father, and here he finds out that Bucky, while programmed as the Winter Soldier, is responsible for killing him and his mother. And while he had a bad relationship with his mother, not mother, while he had a bad relationship with his father, he loved his mother till the day she died. And it's like, it's that regretful moment that I don't want to say defines him, but it's his component in this not being able to let go, because Steve keeps comparing him to his father. His achievements still, while they are so great and have influenced so much, still seem to be held up in comparison to his father. And here is the man who murdered him, prevents him from ever being able to reconcile with his parents, and I think what breaks it is Steve knew. Steve knew all this time that Bucky was the one that killed him. He had been informed about this before, and he didn't tell Tony. And I think had he not known that this next part where pretty much Stark tries to beat the crap out of Bucky would not have gone that way. And this is pretty much the breaking point for everyone and their relation, as you understand why they've made the stances they have in all of this. And Tony is the final... He's not the villain, but he's the final... I don't want to say antagonist either, because it's understandable why he's reacting not exactly in blind rage, but he just needs to vent it, and there's this person responsible, and it's been the one Steve has been defending all movie, despite knowing what he did. And again, you can't fault Steve on this either, because Bucky has been a victim. He was made to do this. He was made to murder Tony's parents amongst with all these other people, and Bucky remembers that too, and he hates himself for that self-loathing, and Tony hates himself for being such a terrible kid to his dad, who was terrible to him in ways, and it's relatable, it's understandable that for them to react like they do, and yet it also seems like they're overreacting in ways, because they're caught up in the moments of the emotion, and they're not able to talk this out, but it still results in the same ends. The team divided, and a lot of them outcast, with Tony realizing that he can't trust his allies, and Steve and the rest of the team outcasts from a world that actually does need them, despite going vigilante. And yeah, they're all in bad shape right now, and it's building the same picture that is what so many of these movies miss. When heroes fight each other, no one wins. And that's another important, mature concept to understand at the end of it. Something I didn't actually address before in kind of my general recap. War Machine, Rhodey, is injured during the big superhero brawl by one of Vision's, superhero guy that got made in Age of Ultron, kind of technically a robot. he's on the same side as War Machine, but in trying to stop the escape of others, his energy shot flies at a... He's trying to hit someone else. That person dodges, but Rhodey was in the same line of sight, and the shot pretty much destroys the power unit for his suit, so he crashes and is partially paralyzed and has to go through physical therapy to do it, and because of that, he ends up in the same position that Wanda was at the beginning of the movie. So there's kind of like a paralleling of respects where previously throughout the film, Vision was trying to protect Wanda from pretty much the outside world due to them popularly hating her, and it's like he for that mistake, and then here's him making that exact same mistake, but on a personal level. So it's not so much same reasons but opposing circumstances, but many people you don't know versus one person you know individually. It's, I want to say about equivalence because you don't want to hurt people you don't know on such a widespread level, and you don't want to hurt someone you're personally connected to. And that, in some ways, the personal connection makes it worse because you're reminded of that simply by looking at them. And yeah, this is all... It's consequences, it's continuity, it's respected as all of these elements, and there's... On social media, I've been saying I'm not on the whole Team Captain America and Team Iron Man thing. I've said I'm Team Deadpool, as in I'm staying out of it, because I'm literally on the fence here of, in context, both people have a point, and so taking sides is refuting the other's legitimate arguments, not against the other side, but an expression of how you deal with these kinds of consequences. Because Team Iron Man side, you're ignoring that. You're ignoring the fact that just because you defeat the bad guy doesn't mean the threat is actually gone. As it's not that simple. Versus Team Captain is ignoring the fact that you can't just do what you want and not be held responsible for them and not acknowledge the consequences. So if you do one, you're missing the point of the other aspect of the argument. And I'm not so much staying out of it, I'm legitimately on both of their sides here. Iron Man has a legitimate point on this. Captain America has a legitimate point on this. It's just when those two sides come into conflict on something that slips through the cracks of both sides, they need to not be opposed. They need to work together, and this is just a series of circumstances where they could not come and do that. I skipped a lot of the movie in this recap, so I ridiculously do recommend you go see it for yourself. And it's like, it's not a Marvel versus DC thing, like I kind of inferred with some of my statements against Batman versus Superman. It's just a general personal perspective and morals and ideologies thing that is just, it's respected. So, yeah, I've gotten into this kind of thing, not just in my Kamen Rider reviews, but in my .hack reviews, in some of my other random reviews. It showed up a lot of places where you can't just stick to one moral ideology, as keeping it blanket across the board is not always going to be applicable. And a bunch of other stuff, and I'm not even really even scratching the surface. I could probably make a 3-hour video picking apart Civil War and just for all this good stuff in it, and yeah. Civil War. Go see it. See you later.